Let's have a look at today's focus on the programme. And 100 years ago, much of northern France was a battlefield as World War I raged. Hundreds of thousands of men died, of course, as millions of artillery shells were fired by each side. Well, today, just below the surface of the region's field lies the evidence of that conflict. For a start, of course, those millions of munitions, as well as the remains of the men whose bodies were never found. Luke Brown and Jean Barrère have this report.
It's known as the Iron Harvest. The rich agricultural plains of northern France are still spitting out the remnants of the First World War.
These are the explosives that have been found during planting season. The tractors that plant the potatoes turn the earth over, and that brings the munitions to the surface. When it comes to harvesting the potato crop, we'll get double what we have here.
Every year, 50 tons of artillery shells are recovered along this sector of the front.
We're used to it. In 20 years, 100 years, you'll still be finding them.
At this rate, it's going to take us 500 years.
Half a millennium, then, to clear this region of the explosives of a century ago. Equipped with a few simple tools, the bomb disposal squad's daily routine involves digging up and removing the weapons of destruction left behind from the First World War.
It's a German shell from the First World War. It hasn't been fired.
This small wood was used by German forces as a munitions depot. Most of the artillery shells here were never fired.
As long as you don't touch it, it can stay like that for 100 years without a problem, as long as there's no human contact. But then there can also be changes inside, and that can mean the shell can suddenly explode.
Artillery shells in their millions were fired during the war, and it's estimated a third didn't explode. A century on, they're still everywhere across the former battlefields of the Western Front.
The biggest one we found is an English 15-incher. That was 800 kilos. This one must be around 100 kilos. That's pretty common.
They may be heavy loads, but each shell has to be manually removed and then taken to a secure site. As well as conventional explosive charges, some munitions still contain poison gas, increasing the risk during transport.
The smell is a warning sign for us, because you've got 4 minutes to react if you come into contact with the chemical agents.
The chemical weapons are stocked and dismantled by the army, but the more unstable explosives have to be disposed of in the old-fashioned way.
We do this pretty regularly. This one's too unstable to stock in the weapons dump. We can't have anyone handling this one in the future. We need to protect our team's safety.
Attention pour le tir. 3, 2, 1, feu!
The century-old battlefield is set to give up its secrets for hundreds of years to come. The ghosts of the First World War are still present a few kilometres behind the front lines. British and Australian troops came to this cave not for shelter, but to visit during their time away from the battle zone. They inscribed in the rocks their names and regiments, a poignant trace of their presence before they returned to the fighting.
Here's just one example. SC Wade, B Company. We were able to find a photograph of this soldier who survived the war and who took part in the Battle of the Somme. Starting from these traces, we can give them new life, because a lot of these soldiers went on to die.
So far, over 100 of the 3,000 names here have been identified, giving shape to the lives of some of the men who were cut down on the battlefield. That's a fraction, though, of the hundreds of thousands whose bodies have never been found.
We misplaced 700,000 men. That sounds mad. And on our level, if we can find the names of some of those missing men, it has a special meaning.
Eh bien, ça donne une dimension un peu particulière.
I've been contacted by the descendants of these soldiers who are very touched because they don't have any other written trace of their grandfather or their great-grandfather.
Ils n'ont pas forcément une trace écrite de leur grand-père ou de l'arrière-grand-père.
For many, the battlefield was their final resting place. 100 years on, the bodies of the dead are still coming to the surface.
Here we have the equivalent of 6 cubic meters of human remains, recovered from 537 graves.
This team of archaeologists is working on excavations at a former German cemetery, each grave containing bones, as well as personal belongings and military equipment. Little by little, they're piecing together who the soldiers were.
The nurse would take a glass bottle and put a note with the soldier's name on it inside, in case the body was ever dug up. Here we have a bottle that we cut open, and inside there's the soldier's name, his date of birth, and the date of death.
These skeletons bear testimony to the violence of modern warfare and the living hell for the soldiers in the trenches.
Here we have a skull that was hit by a projectile. Here's the point of entry, and here we have the exit wounds. You get an idea of the violence of the fighting. Most of the injuries involve multiple wounds. They were hit multiple times.
A century on, the scale of the bloodshed is hard to imagine. The remains of 700,000 soldiers have never been found. The only lasting trace of many are the war cemeteries dotted across the French landscape.
Luke Brown reporting there, moving report for today's focus. More news coming up very shortly. Stay with us on France Studio.